The 6-year curriculum is really an expression of an old term, which we used for many years, which is lifelong learning, right? Everybody knows that lifelong learning is sort of a catchphrase and a catch sort of concept. But now somebody in a book, a woman named something Weiss, had just written a book called Long Life Learning. Our lives are getting longer, and we have more chances to learn now as we live longer, and learning goes productively well into older age people such as myself. So but really the learning learning for adults after college really, even during college, really is usually prompted by some sort of life transition from school to work, from career to career, from career to retirement, from not being a parent to being a parent. All these are significant transitions that usually call for education. And people who look for education after they go through college are even more sort of often prompted by some sort of life transition or some sort of ambition that points toward a life transition. And so the 60-year curriculum is really, it could have been the 100-year curriculum, but we decided after a long time that the 60-year curriculum expressed enough of the idea that we wouldn't sort of go off into the stratosphere and call it the 100-year curriculum, all right? So 60 years is sort of what we agreed to almost arbitrarily. But it's the whole notion that as the motivation for people to come back, working adults, for instance, to come back is usually prompted by some sort of economic prompt. They want to get a better job. They want to enter a new career. They want to do something better. Obviously, there's also education relating to parenting, for instance, which is something universities don't usually do, but they certainly could, and that's part of a big life transition for most of us, right? And then, of course, as I say, from career to retirement, or now it's more important for people in my generation or a little bit younger, is the transition of their parents from life to death, and that whole process, and that's a big transition as well. So basically what we're saying is that universities ought to be able to remain relevant to their students well after they graduate people from college. And in fact, what's happening in a lot of accrediting agencies, at least in the United States, they're requiring you to create learning objectives or desired outcomes for your students that go beyond just getting a degree or getting a grade. It's what happens to you after, what's happened to you 6 months after you graduate. Do you have a productive job? Are you in a productive relationship? Are you still living with your parents? Or what's happening with you, And so the whole notion of what North American higher education was, which is to get a degree, is now being extended institutionally to a lifelong learning, a long life learning method, a purpose, okay? And part of that purpose is something that I didn't incorporate in previous things about 60-year curriculum, but part of that purpose is the relevance of our education in colleges and universities. How relevant is it? We know that over 80% of students and their parents of traditional college-age students, they cite getting a job or getting into a good career as the main reason they're going to college. Well, how can universities and colleges be learner-centered if they don't recognize that motivation and put that in their pedagogical plan? And one of the big things that we're working on now, and that I see as a huge opportunity for us and a huge change in higher education, and this is something for your designers to really think about, and that is what's commonly called badging or alternative digital credentialing. digital credentialing in general. What we're using it for here at UCI is to serve continuing education students with very relevant, competency-based, work-relevant badges. When I say competency-based, I'm not talking about, there's a difference between competency-based and learning achievement. You learn something and you get an A. Can you actually apply that? That's competency, okay? As you know, well the difference between learning achievement and competency, so that's not a new concept for you. But we've concentrated on competency-based assessments for workplace relevant skills and abilities. And what's happened, and particularly starting out right now, we've been in this for about 2 years, but we've got really liftoff in our engineering school, who is, when they create courses now, they're requiring their faculty to actually have a badge associated with each course, so that when you're learning programming, you also get a badge in Python, or you get the idea. We have textile design, we get a badge in Photoshop design for textiles, right? There's a Photoshop specialty in textile design. So 3D printing is required in some of our art courses. You get a design in Rhinoceros 6.0, get a badge in Rhinoceros 6.0. So basically what we're doing is we're already building in an intentionality toward workplace relevant stuff inside our regular curriculum, okay? And that's where I think a large part of what we're going to be what universities are going to be doing is doing things like that actually help not only students get the skills they need to go into the workplace, and also document and verify those skills so they can put them on their resume and gain competitive advantage in the workplace, but also to actually help people understand what careers are available to majors and embed those items into the actual classroom experiences, at least in a few courses. So for instance, everybody thinks about, oh, there's a real problem with humanities graduates who can't get jobs because their jobs aren't technical enough. The jobs out there available are not technical enough. That is absolutely not true. You know, I hold 2 hats here. I'm Dean of Continuing Education. I'm also Vice Provost for Career Pathways or Career Services on our campus. That unit that I lead is responsible for getting 38,000 students on our campus into good careers once they graduate. And the idea is that if we can really help people understand what careers are available to them with particular majors. So for instance, humanities majors, about 12% of them end up in sales. Well, sales is a huge career and often very lucrative career. And so, but people who think humanities graduates probably don't even think of sales when they start the humanities program, right? But they end up being articulate, able to communicate, organized discipline and so forth, so that they can become good people in sales or in the helping services of all kind, or even in technical areas which they can acquire after they graduate from continuing education schools like ours. So basically what I'm suggesting is that the 60-year curriculum really begins when we get a hold of the student when they're 18, traditional age students, and continues right through until they retire or decide to change careers at age 65 because they got a retirement fund that they can rely on, and now they can do something else with their lives, right? And so basically we're really, that's sort of a broad scope of the 60-year curriculum as I see it.
You mentioned several points that are really at the heart of our discussions now in Canada, and I'm talking about University Laval, but also in different higher ed institutions, and we're talking really about relevance. And how to, especially with this now gig economy, and, students are learners, right? Sometimes they don't see the value of investing their time and many years to get a degree when you have big organizations that are actually, having their own certificates, and then you can simply take the certificate and get into the job market very rapidly. So we're looking at how can we see the higher ed of the future who will actually answer to these needs. So before even going more into changing careers, starting the career, so you're talking about these learners who are, we need to catch them as of 18 years old, right? So starting their freshman years, but with the gig economy, with what is being offered from different learning providers, many of them are rethinking the value of university. So how are you addressing this?
Well, again, I think we need to make our university experience more relevant to their lives, and that's I sort of outlined a lot of that in what I just said. But at the same time, ultimately, there are going to be a huge number of providers that are going to provide relatively quick fixes to workplace deficits, that is, skill deficits in the workplace. There are going to be providers that come along and say, okay, well, boot camps are a particular example of this. We take some people, a very few people, from a high school diploma to a $60,000 a year job in 6 months doing programming, computer programming, right? That's a quick fix. It didn't talk about having an understanding of North American history or philosophy of Socrates or whatever. Didn't have a general education requirement associated with it, but they got a good job really fast at a relatively small investment of money. That our boot camp that does that costs about $12,000 versus, very large. I don't know what University of Laval charges, but it's probably more than $12,000 a year. So basically what I'm saying is that we are going to have to face competition. We have to very carefully define our value proposition. That value proposition should include the relevance of an education, of a broad-based education that allows people to gain critical thinking so that they can go to larger and larger areas of responsibilities after they get the technical training that they need. And basically, you see a lot of people sort of plateau because they don't have the kind of skills and abilities and critical thinking skills that people with a broader education have. And so we have to really market that there's nothing more practical than a theoretical education in a way, and that we have to be able to really look at people need to be able to look at the broader range rather than depend on these quick fixes.
Yeah, and do you happen to see, based on your experience, people who leave, like they don't start and then at some point they realize that they actually need this kind of education and come back? Because now with COVID, we saw many of people coming back, right? And some of them, maybe they didn't have these initial degrees, but now they realize that they needed these degrees and they're coming back. So did you see any movements because of COVID, because of the whole, because we also have the digital transformation that's happening that was accelerated by COVID, but also we have the shift in jobs. We have all different things that are happening in the job market because of COVID that brought back many of people from the workplace back to education.
I think that's true. First of all, the main effect on higher education that COVID had was the increased acceptance of online and remote learning. as a factor in education. So I think that was the main thing. But at the same time, I think the COVID crisis pushed a lot of people into a more accelerated awareness of the life transitions they're going through, right? Suddenly you had a major disruption in their lives. And this major disruption had them recalibrate psychologically and economically and in every other way their lives. And they say, geez, do I want to go back to this job, serving drinks at a bar in a restaurant, or do I want to become a food and beverage manager in a restaurant or something? You get the idea that a lot of people sort of got a wake-up call about their lives, and again, the 60-year curriculum comes in and says, yes, we do have a special certificate program in food and drink management in restaurants, okay? Or we got project management. We got a project management certificate program, or a personal financial planning, or a paralegal program, or something like that. So that if I was in a clerical job, I might now think about, well, if I get a paralegal, I'll get again $60,000 a year minimum, and in a job, if I get a job in a legal firm. So you get the idea that I think COVID really spurred a lot of people to rethink their lives.
One of the things that I really was impressed by the 60 years curriculum, and this is my understanding of it, and please correct me if I have an incorrect perception of it, is that at some point in one of your talks, you spoke about how it's important to have these, the young students at 18, let's say, who will start their university classes and courses, and through this preparation, you need to prepare them for the 60 years curriculum, for learning and learn how to learn and continue learning. However, even if you don't catch them at 18, I feel as the 60 years curriculum is made for anyone who needs to jump in at any point of his or her life to really get on the train and be able to, to change, to reinvent themselves, to get a degree. So I feel that it's not like, when you read it, you think, the first impression, you think that it is 60 years, so we have to start and continue, through the process. But at reality, at any time in life where you feel that you need to get some learning, right, it will be, welcoming you, right? Like it will give you a solution. I felt that the 60 years curriculum is really an inclusive, equitable, for any situation of any learners. I don't know if my perception is correct or.
Well, yeah, definitely. I think people come to a recognition that they need more education at various times in their lives with various intensity, okay? So for instance, one very intense period comes about 1 or 2 years after you graduate, where suddenly you look at your future and say, gosh, I'm not going to get much further unless I get an MBA, right? So that's a typical pathway. My son followed that pathway. He got a history degree at USC. He went into finance. He got a certificate program. He took a certificate program at Extension here and became a certified financial planner. And now he wants another set of initials after his name called MBA, right? Because he thinks that's going to teach him something, and also he'll get more credibility with his clients. And then after that, he wants to get a certified financial advisor, CFA. You get the idea that there's a pathway, and that these things, these learning projects queue themselves up in a way so that he now doesn't even think about it so much as he understands that I'm going to spend a lot of my evenings for the next 20 years studying something, right? Because he wants to get an MBA. He's taking one course at a time. That'll take him quite a while. Every 6 weeks, he gets a new course, but that'll still take him quite a while. And then studying for the CFA is going to be really tough. That's going to take a lot of time and effort. But the same with you and me. I mean, I started out, got a degree, got my certified public accounting by studying and going to courses. Then I got an MBA, and then I got a PhD, and those things. And my PhD took me 15 years to get. So I'm the epitome of a lifelong learner, right? Because I just went through all these things, and so did you to get your terminal degree and so forth. So learning has become a part of life. It's integrated as part of your life in a way that didn't happen before. There were all these sort of starts and stops in your education, that you had to sort of enter into. But now it's just saying, gosh, this is what I'm going to be doing for the much of the rest of my life. I'm going to be learning something.
Absolutely. I was an interior designer back in another life before I moved to Canada in 2008. And then I discovered education technology, and I shifted towards another thing, and I did my master's and PhD. So exactly, and I really changed my whole career, and it was really a great opportunity for me. You talked about when you were talking, you talked about the relationship between the institution and the graduates. So once they graduate, they're not leaving because they can always come back. So how do you maintain this relationship with your graduates, and how do you motivate them to come back and continue?
Well, first of all, I think people do concentrate on their alumni a lot because they think they're going to get money from their alumni.
Yeah. This is usually that, right?
Yeah, you have to see my hands for this. We say, congratulations, you got a degree. Give me money, give me money. Put your hand the other way and give me money, right? So but the point is that I don't know the background of your university that well, but for my university, which is a land grant public university, our obligation really is to better the citizens of the state. And the idea is that we need to help the economy, our regional and state economy, by filling in the skills gaps that aren't there that are increasingly apparent in the workforce that we have. So we have not only an obligation to individuals, but to the society as a whole to continue to fill our roles. And if we suddenly stop when we issue somebody a degree, we're really not fulfilling our role as a land grant university at all. That's not what land grant universities were established for. The land grant university was really established originally. The idea was that it was going to be agriculture and mechanics, what's called engineering now. It was expanded to having all university subjects, but originally it was really focused on engineering and agriculture. And that whole thing was that, yes, once you graduate in agriculture, you go out and you grow stuff effectively in a field somewhere, right? Well, that tradition is very, very strong in the land grant tradition. And if universities don't understand that and consider their job done when they graduate, it's not only the people that graduate from their institutions, the people in the community that have graduated from other universities that they need to serve as well. So basically, we have a much broader obligation to the public than just our own graduates, I think.
How do you, one of the things that we talk about when we talk about lifelong learning, and we talk about the whole ecosystem, and how do you feel that the university fits? Like, of course, it fits in the ecosystem, but what kind of partnerships that you need to maintain and nurture and really grow with the community, with the public, with the society, to be able to really fit in this lifelong learning ecosystem, and that the 60 years curriculum actually answers to the need of the society and the community?
Well, your question kicks me into another gear here because I'm seeing a huge change in the competitive landscape for university continuing education, particularly, but universities in general. I forget exactly, but there's something like 6 billion. There's $90 billion. $90 billion was pumped into the higher education industry and in venture capital in 2019. That increased to 120 billion in 2020 and went up and it's probably going to surpass that in 2021. That money is not coming directly to universities. It's going to for-profit startups who want to be the next Amazon. There's a huge market for higher education throughout the world, and the market for education in general is something like $7.3 trillion by 2025. And we're not, that's a huge amount of money to be spending on education. And there are plenty of people trying to jump onto the gold mine train to get that gold. And it's going a lot to people, as I say, in the for-profit sphere. Universities have no chance of gaining the kind of capital they need in order to achieve economies of scale that gets the per unit price down and far enough to be able to serve people in India, for instance, or Pakistan or Africa, right? We're now charging generally a college course in North America usually costs around $1,200 to $2,000 per course. Okay, at UC, which is highly subsidized by state funds, well, not highly subsidized, but subsidized by state funds, the tuition turns out to be $15,000 a year, which is about $1,300 a course, and that's a subsidized situation. So $1,300 a course. The market in India will not stand much over $500 a course, okay? So basically, the only way we're going to get down to that price point is to have economies of scale. And the only way we get to economies of scale is to put a huge amount of capital into the design of courses, the platforms that courses are delivered over, the workflow processes that have to go on with people using technology to help students, all those kinds of things that you're teaching your students at your university, all those things are going to have to get several times better than they are now to get us down there, but they're also progressing rapidly to those several times better. As you know, we're getting new pedagogical research that indicates new possibilities in technology. The technology is coming along, digitization, all that. We've got, learning analytics that are coming at us, and that we're really going to be more effective probably. All these wonderful things that are coming at us are relatively slowly being adopted by universities. And so we really have to look at the whole ecosystem of higher education and where the money is going, because that money is going to have a big effect. No matter what you say, that money is going to have a big effect. No matter what you want, whether how much you want to protect the traditional university as a cathedral, as a monastery on a hill somewhere, it's not going to happen. It's going to be a cathedral in the marketplace with a market around it, and that's where we're going to survive. We're not going to survive as a monastery on a mountaintop. So basically, it's a big issue. This money coming into education is a big issue for us.
And just to to go back to how are we going to survive?
Well, to me, there's number one is that we need to form effective partnerships with these outfits that are really dedicated to high quality instruction and to reaching the markets that we need to reach. There's no way the University of California, Irvine can reach individuals in India with the marketing efforts we do from our own site. We need partners that are in India, that are doing marketing, that are finding students, that are serving students. We're not going to be able to do that ourselves from Irvine, or even from Berkeley or UCLA. Despite their reputations, they're not going to be able to find and serve students in India at a 500 per course rate anytime soon. So something's got to give, and either the private industries will be able to do that and do it effectively, or they're going to form effective partnerships with universities that can add value to the educational experience from our own experience, and form solid partnerships. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we need to really concentrate on our regional economies, because we have the relationships in many ways with the corporations and the employers of our region, and we can work with them much more effectively than, say, a Coursera can, or a Georgia Tech can from Georgia with their IT courses. So basically, we need to also concentrate on our local region for the kind of services that they really personal service they expect from us. I use the word big box stores. I think Coursera, YouTube, these folks are big box stores, and on the one hand, we're trying to put our product on the shelves of those big box stores. On the other hand, we're trying to be the mom and pop grocery store in our local regions to sort of serve people on a personal basis and on a very customized basis.
Yeah. So I'm looking at time, and I want to make sure that I'm touching on another thing that you mentioned a bit rapidly, and I want you to talk more about, which is the alternative digital credential movement, and the whole idea of the digital credential. Now I can't pronounce the word, but I saw you published about the challenges of digital credentials and how universities should respond to that. So can you tell us a bit about the alternative digital credential movement and your work? You talked about badges, but why is it so important to really focus on that? And what are the challenges about to be able to actually go through the process and present this and offer this to our learners?
First of all, digital badges present a wonderful opportunity for universities to be more relevant to their populations. We have not, until digital credentials came along, we had no way of really verifying skills and abilities at a granular enough level to be relevant to the workplace. We could give, for instance, an A in artificial intelligence. What the heck does that mean? Nobody knows what that means, right? Especially if you had it 3 years ago. Artificial intelligence has changed quite a bit since 3 years ago, right? So, but inside artificial intelligence, there are all kinds of technologies and so forth that are relevant to artificial intelligence, which we can cite competencies in, okay? So basically, digital credentials, if we use them correctly, and that's a big if, and I'll get to that in a minute, if we use them correctly, are a wonderful way for us universities to lend our credibility to workplace relevant skills, okay? Which we haven't had that mechanism before. Now we do. The trick is the challenge. I'll go to the challenge for a minute. The challenge is you can badge just about anything, right? You could badge this conversation we're having, right? I'll give you a badge on the latest issues in continuing education. Okay, you put it on your resume, all right? You can badge participation. You can badge anything. You can badge anything. And there's a tendency on campuses to badge just about anything. Not that this is bad in the sense that, for instance, one thing we have an impulse to do is, let's say a student is really been outstanding in public service. They've tutored people in high school, they've served in clinics. We really want to give them some recognition for that wonderful work that they've done. Is it a competency? Probably not. It's something that you put on your resume, but it's not a competency. If you're a leader, you show so much leadership in the clubs and the student government and so forth. We want to give you a badge in leadership. What the heck is leadership? Is it competency? How do you know how do you know someone's a competent leader? All this kind of stuff. So there are things that we really, it's almost more important to know what you're not going to badge than what you're going to badge in effect. And so what we've decided, again, I'll go back to it. We decided that number one, it should be a competency that is relevant in a workplace. It's not going to be understanding the operatic form, even if that's a wonderful thing to learn, but it's probably not relevant to the workplace. Understanding the politics of the Middle East. Very rarely is that going to be a competency you need in the workplace, right? But knowing Rhinoceros 6.0 is pretty important in some things, right? And being able for us to say that this person can actually operate Rhinoceros 6.0 and come up with a 3D dimensional object that makes sense and is well designed, that's a competency that we can certify. So basically, the notion is that digital credentialing, if restricted and well defined, can really help universities fulfill their missions to be relevant to the local economy and relevant to people who are trying to get jobs in that economy. All right. Again, the problem is if everybody on our campus, we've actually corralled, I think, most people from doing irrelevant or superfluous badges so far. There's always a trick that these badges will proliferate across a campus, everybody issuing their own badges and different badge icons and all this kind of stuff. Badge proliferation is a big problem on campus. It will be a big problem on campuses, I think.
So for you to use them correctly, because this is what I not tried immediately. So to use them correctly is really to focus on competencies that will be relevant to the workplace, right? Very concrete competencies. So this is something that will be emerging from the courses and the learning that will be happening within the university. But do you also put badges on skills that were developed out there, like outside, and then you recognize, right, skills that were developed outside the education institution and then help, like, use them to build on? So I'm gonna let you discuss this.
Yes, what we do, theoretically, the competency-based badge is not tied to any particular learning pathway.
Okay.
You could learn it on the job. You could learn it in a class, in a community college. You could learn it anywhere. But for us to put a certification on it, you have to demonstrate according to our criteria that you know how to do this, okay? So for instance, we have a bunch of students who are working in our mammalian cell analysis techniques lab. They were learning how to pipette and how to write notes, and how to do a journal and all this kind of stuff. But there was no way that they could really put that all down. So we're giving them a badge in mammalian cell manipulation techniques or something like that. I forgot the exact name of it, but you get the idea. Well, that's pretty powerful when you can show that a student has actually done this and been effective at it. We also had a challenge because the people who are engaged in entrepreneurship on our campus, they wanted to give entrepreneurs a badge. I said, well, you can't, it's really hard to decide whether a person is a competent entrepreneur. In fact, many entrepreneurs fail a number of times before they're successful. So what are you talking about? But we do know that, for instance, getting creating a business plan and creating a business pitch and getting funding, those are skills that we can actually establish competency in, right? So our badge in getting funding for an entrepreneurial operation says that in order to get a badge, you have to get at least 20,000, somebody outside your family to donate at least $20,000 to your idea. That's a pretty good demonstration of competency, right? So you get the idea that some of these things look a little hard at first, but then you can break them down maybe and come up with the skills needed to be that competent, right?
Yeah. And how did you manage to, because again, you know, when you have a new approach and an innovative way of evaluating, of recognizing skills, you need to have this acceptability, right, of these new badge, like this new approach of recognizing skills. So how did you manage to have this accessibility to that people that, you know, that whether faculty members or the workplace see how this is, how can I say that, reliable and really count on and really rely on these badges. So how did you promote it and have, you know, the targeted audience really accept it?
We're still working on our internal process, but basically our process says that when we're dealing with matriculated students, the faculty have to approve the badge.
Okay.
The academic senate has to approve the badge. When we're dealing with people from continuing education, like in our boot camps, the approval of the badge rests with me as dean, which I delegate, of course, but you get the idea that non-matriculated students, the badges are approved by the dean of continuing education.
Okay.
And so that's why we felt really that we needed to involve the faculty, but the faculty often do not have the skills and abilities to understand the badging of particular industries or particular kinds of skills. And so, but when we're dealing with a graduate or an undergraduate student, they do.
So another question, going back to faculty members, how do you, whether regarding the 60 years curriculum or the whole, you know, changes that you're bringing in and the badges, how do you bring them on board? Because they are a big, you know, part of the system and they need to get on board.
Well, I told you one of my hats is as Vice Provost for Career Pathways. And one of the things my staff has done in that area is to work with faculty, and we found a number of willing faculty who are willing to actually embed career information in their courses themselves. And in fact, one of the things we employ is something called Big Interview, which is a technology that allows students to be asked questions from a particular discipline that they might be asked if they're going out and getting a job. And they can choose between easy questions, medium questions, and hard questions. An actual physical person comes on and asks them the question, and then they respond and get that recorded. Well, that process is now being used by several of our faculty members as part of an assignment to give a student a grade, okay? And we've gotten more and more interest in trying to embed these kinds of experiences using technologies that we have control over in career services for the actual pedagogy of our courses. So whenever that's the key factor. Through ADC, through digital credentialing, or through other kinds of designed exercises that actually give credit, because students don't respond to anything that doesn't give them credit, right? So you got to embed those things inside the courses. That's the real key to success in this field, and we're beginning to make a few inroads in it here and there in our campus.
Yeah, this is great. This is great. One last question that I have for you. And again, I'm talking about because I'm working at Université Laval, and we know that here in Canada, in all the higher education institutions, we really have the EDI issues, and really the attention to EDI at the heart of all our planification for the future, and now what we're doing, and also for the future. So how do you see the 6 years curriculum and also badging, all the badges answering or really addressing the issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion in higher education?
Well, fortunately, and I'm very proud of the fact that at UCI, these figures may astound you, or may impress you. 40% of our undergraduate students are what's called Pell eligible. That is, they're the poorest students in our state. 40%. We have more Pell eligible students in our single campus than the entire Ivy League has together in all their campuses. We are an AAU member. I think you know what an AAU member is. Those are the top 61 universities in the country. We're an AAU member. We're one of only, I think, 3 Hispanic serving institutions in that number. That means over 25% of our student body are Hispanic or Latinx. Okay. Over 50% of the students that are entering class this year were first generation students, first in their generation to go to college. So when we serve our students with career services and so forth, we have to take into account the special circumstances of these folks. And we do by trying to get them to prepare themselves to go into a work situation, into authentic work environment sometime during their undergraduate career, which means they have to be trained not to wear flip-flops and shorts, not to spend time on their phone when they get to work, understand what mentorship is, understand, etiquette, be able to work Excel and Microsoft Office, these kinds of things. We're trying to give them opportunities for authentic workplace experience, either jobs, internships, paid or unpaid, volunteer, or job shadowing or something, mentoring, some way of getting them involved in the actual workplace experience. So that's basically, I don't know if I answered your question, but that's one of the ways we're trying to help these students. These students, I tied a Windsor knot when I came to work this morning. Most of our students, they never had a tie on. They never saw their fathers put a tie on, right? So, by the way, something like 60% of our students don't speak English when they go home. They're Persian, they're Hindi, my wife is Indian, they speak Gujarati. We just went to a Diwali festival this weekend, and all the kids were speaking Gujarati with their parents and stuff. So basically, we have California, where Montreal is also very diverse, I know, but California, especially here in Southern California, we're a very, very diverse community. So we're serving a very diverse student body.
Yeah, so there's the whole diversity in this aspect with this perspective, but also I think the idea of having the institution ready to accept learners at any age, in any age group, in any level of their career level, at any phase of their life where they need to make a change, where I feel that even having this opportunity to actually be able to feel that regardless of who I am and at what stage I am, I will have an opportunity to grow through this curriculum, right? Like through whatever the institution is it is ready for me to be able to give me to really accompany me through this transition. So I think that this is also based on my, like our discussion today and the readings, and even when you talk about badges, and that you're actually recognizing skills and competencies that were developed at the workplace or in any other experience. You're not excluding these people who are, developing these skills outside the university or any education institutions. You're actually welcoming them, and you're giving them ways to be recognized and to continue in their path, right? So I feel that all of this is also part of why I think that it's really, I'm very impressed by the program and what you're doing. And it's really answering to a lot of challenges that we have when we talk about EDI, right?
Yeah, so one of the things you're talking about, diversity and inclusion, excuse me. One of the things we're trying to do is, well, the university itself is the largest employer of our own students. So what we're trying to do with the job descriptions of the student workers is to embed and reconstitute the skills, so that instead of saying that you're helping people in the library find books or something, that actually, because of the diversity of our campus, you're getting a multicultural experience, which is something that's really good on your resume, right?
Absolutely.
Or if you're working in a lab, you're getting these lab skills. Or if you're working in education, you got a chance to be in the classroom. You get the idea that we want to create job descriptions that translate into the skills needed in the workplace, not just the functional elements of them. Yes, you were serving lunch, but you were also serving, as I say, a diverse population. You were learning how to organize your time. You were learning all kinds of stuff, right? So learning how to take orders and so forth. So basically, that's another way that we can help students be prepared and be shown to be prepared for the workplace when they graduate.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the things that what we have when we have a PhD degree is that when you apply for, any job outside of academia, the question is that, okay, but you're a scholar, so what can you actually do? And we're like,
right.
we do any, like we have a lot of things, that project management and all of these, right? Things that are expected outside of academia, but it's like they are not stated or listed as they should be. So I totally get what you're saying. It's really important to translate all the skills that we're developing, regardless of the degree, regardless of the experience that we're having on campus, to something that will actually speak to the workplace and people who will be hiring us. And right, so this is amazing.
I saw a television show where a woman was returning to work after being a housewife, and her organizational skills were being questioned. She says, "Listen, I raised 3 kids. You don't think I was you don't think I have organizational skills? What the hell's wrong with you?"
Absolutely. Gary, thank you so much for your time. I don't want to take more than what who is scheduled. I know that your time is very valuable. So I really benefited a lot. I really enjoyed the discussion and all the insight that you gave me today.